Let's talk a little 49ers Bears. Probably not a game that's going to get like a ton of traction because it doesn't have a huge game total or anything, but I think it's one of the more intriguing games of week one because of what we care about for future, right? We want to see these teams immediately week one so we can start that calibration process. Let's start with the 49ers side and, Trey Lance finally officially taking over. We'll see, how much if the rug gets pulled, there's a loosey with the football situation here. But Trey Lance is going to be the San Francisco 49ers starting quarterback in week one. He offers some kind of ceiling here that, Kyle Shanahan hasn't had, but there also is a very different floor here for this offense as well. And I'm curious just from a top-down stance, because I haven't heard you talk about, Trey Lance this offseason, like what you're expecting from this offense and how it impacts the pass catchers here on the San Francisco side, because the investment in Deebo Samuel was a second-round pick. The investment in George Kittle was a top 5 tight end. People are hopeful and are following the buzz of Brandon Ayuk. What are we thinking that we're going to see here out of the box here from Trey Lance and the 49ers?
It should be good, and it should take the Bears a bit off guard, because I think that the 49ers didn't show us anything. So what's exciting about Trey Lance? Why are we excited about Trey Lance? Because the Kyle Shanahan system, which incorporates all of these play action looks, they scheme players open. Look at even Nick Mullins, right, had a good yards per attempt piloting that offense. The offense sets up the quarterback for success in the running game. in the passing game. And that's just teams having to be flexibly minded, malleable to what they see, right? The Kyle Shanahan offense tests the defenders to make the right decisions. And what do you have in this game? Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, probably going to play big roles in the secondary, right? This is a tough test, right? Rich, you can look at this like for the 49ers, this is like when Alabama opens up against Georgia Southern. Well, App State did beat Michigan that one time. But I have to say that because you're in the state of Ohio, right? For Chicago, on the other hand, for this defense, Mike Eberflus is putting together, this is a really stiff test. This is like a midterm or a final in week one, defending this offense. When you add these 11-on-11 looks, and I don't think in the preseason Kyle Shanahan showed anybody what the true 11-on-11 looks are going to be. I think there were plays that just looked kind of ordinary because those plays are actually going to turn into design Trey Lance runs. And the last time we saw a running quarterback piloting a Kyle Shanahan offense was Robert Griffin III in his rookie year. He was, depending on your scoring system, the #1 fantasy quarterback on a points per game basis. And he didn't have Brandon Ayuk. He didn't have Deebo Samuel. He didn't have George Kittle or even Danny Gray. Let's remember that name, because Danny Gray looked like the guy, and this is like a deep DFS lineup diversity guy, right? He's the guy that if you have the play where Trey Lance throws it as far as he can, Danny Gray runs under it. That could end up being the real trump card for this offense. So I think we're going to see a lot of looks that we haven't seen. I think we're going to see some young Bears defenders put in bad positions, and it should be a success for San Francisco. And it should be a success for San Francisco on defense. I think that whatever you ask Justin Fields to do to make a step forward, again, it's going to be a little rougher for the offenses this week than the defenses. So, West Coast team traveling east, you never know, but this should be a cakewalk for them.
Yeah, on the other side of the ball, Justin Fields is a guy who is almost like a proxy for fantasy football of what Lance has to offer. Similar draft picks. They're mobile quarterbacks, but doesn't have quite the insulation in terms of insulation and foundation that
Right.
the 49ers can provide. But we did see kind of Luke Getsky in this offense in the preseason kind of show like they want to get the ball out on the intermediate level of the field, and move Justin Fields around in the pocket a lot more than he did as a rookie. That was kind of his thing. That's an Ohio State system thing. These guys are standing back there and waiting for those deep crossers, those deep digs to get wide open, at the collegiate level. And it's kind of hurt a little bit of growth in the quick game in the NFL. But we see the quick game in, being installed, for the Bears this preseason. How optimistic are you that, maybe Justin Fields could be one of these underpriced, kind of Konami type quarterbacks,
Right.
or is it just like there's just not enough around here to make this thing kind of happen?
I'm glad you said Konami code. Every time I say Konami code on my show, I say, "What's up, Rich?" I don't know if your nose gets itchy or your ear tingles or something. I think that we know statistically that for Justin Fields to be a fantasy bust or otherwise not live up to a very modest ADP, he would have to be a horrible passer or just lose the physical talent that made him a top 12, 11, when they take him pick. So I think that he's going to be successful for fantasy. And I actually think the misery of the Bears will give him garbage time game scripts. And he could end up actually maybe rivaling what Jalen Hurts did, which gives you a low end quarterback one. So for fantasy, that's going to work out. And I think you mentioned the key thing, which is they're moving him around. This is a terrible offensive line. The guard play might be improved if Tevin Jenkins is better as a guard. The interior offensive line is okay. The tackles, good luck. I mean, this is just, we'll see. Going against Nick Bosa.
Yeah. Especially this team.
Yeah. So it's rational to move the pocket around. It's rational to have designed rollouts. It's rational to use that mobility. And they even said things this summer, Rich, like we're practicing scramble drills now. We didn't do that. Like that's going to be, and the guy that's in the target, the bullseye for me is Darnell Mooney. And I think that even just an incremental improvement in efficiency for this offense is nowhere to go but up. If Darnell Mooney had 1,000 yards last year. So Darnell Mooney, so let's talk about summertime, Rich, right? Remember when you were like middle school and sometimes you would come back from the summer, maybe you hung out with some friends and some friends live in your neighborhood, but there'd be some kids you didn't see all summer. And sometimes kids would hit puberty over the summer, right? And they would come back and be, whoa, you didn't look like this in May. And I think Darnell Mooney, and we're especially looking at like third-year players. We didn't mention this with Dawson Knox, Gabriel Davis, for instance. There are going to be some players that when we see them come back to school in week one, we're going to say, okay. And I think Darnell Mooney could be one of those guys, especially based on the reporting we've been seeing from people like Dan Pompei. Obviously, Cole Kmet is the other player. There's a cast of anonymous wide receivers after that. I don't know how they're really going to use those guys. We'll see what San Francisco does to try to hold down Darnell Mooney, because I think when you say scramble drill and you think of Darnell Mooney's speed, that's where you say maybe there's an advantage the Bears can exploit here. Although at Ohio State, I didn't see Justin Fields as a quarterback who naturally thought of attacking as a passer when the play broke down. Is that something that Luke Getsy can help him with? Again, this is another one of those ones where we might overreact to week one. It might be miserable for Chicago's offense, but those are the players we should need to be watching.
Yeah, I mean, just the matchup of defensive line versus the offensive line is such skewed, dramatically, objectively on paper. But when you do think about the 49ers, where they like maybe objectively don't have the greatest talent, it's with all the parts they've had moving on the back end. And if you can just hit a couple, because we know the targets are where they're going to in Chicago. Like they're going to Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet. So,
right.
On a weekly basis, you're just hoping to hit that big play or two.